The 1400-year-old Islam-driven terrorism is not triggered by despair or by Israel, which was established in 1948, but by local, regional, and global religious, political, and territorial Islam-driven ambitions, terrorizing mostly Muslims, as well as Christians, Hindus, and Jews. For example, the Ayatollahs of Iran are the world's leading sponsors of Islam-driven terrorism, solidifying their minority rule through repression and mostly anti-US hate education, extending financial, training, operational, and equipment support to Islamic terrorists in the Persian Gulf region in an attempt to topple all pro-US Arab regimes, the Middle East, and all over the world. 2016 has seen unprecedented proliferation of Islam-driven terrorism, systematically and deliberately targeting civilians beyond the traditionally terror-stricken countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, expanding to Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, India, Bangladesh, Niger, Nigeria, Somalia, Ivory Coast, Russia, France, Belgium, Germany, Britain, Australia, and the USA. Hundreds of anti-US terrorist plots have been foiled since 9/11. In 2015 alone, there were 11,774 terrorist attacks in 92 countries. From 1970 to 2016, there were about 150,000 terrorist incidents worldwide, increasingly afflicting Europe and the USA. France is on a verge of insecurity-driven anarchy, which could deteriorate into civil war. According to the latest European Union Terrorism Situation and Trend Report, the overall terror threat to the security of the European Union remains on an upward trajectory. The main concern is jihadist terrorism. By far, the most affected member state was France. The elevated threat to the European Union is operationally based in the Middle East, combined with a network of people born and raised in the European Union, often radicalized within a short space of time. Just like Europe, Russia, and China, India has been afflicted by Islam-driven terrorism. According to the Indian Express, jihad terrorism has everything to do with Islam. It is strict adherence to Islam that ISIS commits its hideous crimes. As long as we continue to lie about Islam's direct connection to jihadi terrorism, we will never be able to deal with the problem. According to Dr. Mordechai Kedar, a leading expert on Islam, there is no radical or moderate Islam, there is Islam. Unlike Judaism and Christianity, there is violence for the sake of Islam, as documented by text in the Quran and the Hadith, which is a collection of ancient commentaries on the Quran in precedents set by Muhammad and published in his biographies. Moreover, adds Dr. Kedar, ideas about subjugating the world are found in many Islamic letters, in the history of early caliphs and Islamic history books, which describe in great details the massive conquest of infidel lands during the initial centuries of Islam, and what the conquerors brought upon the subjugated infidel. These are components of a single unifying explanation for all the thousands of jihadists from different nations, backgrounds, and positions, reflecting the violence embedded in all these sources as methods for spreading the Islamic faith when peaceful methods are ineffective. The idea of jihad is based on dividing people into believers and heretics, with the believers fighting the heretics, a fair game for violence. Islam-driven massacres are occurring with increasing frequency and are aimed both at Muslims and unbelievers. Political correctness and willful blindness will kill America. It is already killing Europe, where the human landscape is morphing after decades of Muslim immigration. The Atlantic is not wide enough to protect the USA from jihadist ideology. In conclusion, countering Islam-driven terrorism requires ideological clarity and realism, not ideological ambiguity, namely an end to political correctness which separates terrorism from Islam and Sharia laws, which have guided 14 centuries of Islam-driven terrorism, stopping the current oversimplification and recklessness of defining terrorism as workplace violence, hate crime, extremism, radicalism, or an expression of social, economic, and political frustration. Terminate the purging of any reference to Islam and Islamic doctrines from the training literature of the counter-terrorism agencies in the USA. Abolish the attempt at creating a moral equivalency between terrorists and their victims, and the assumption that one's terrorist is someone else's freedom fighter. Political correctness constitutes a clear and present danger to global peace, including the U.S. homeland security. The next video will present the unholy alliance of narco-Islamic terrorism.